We are live, Kanchi.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kanchi Shah, General Manager for Content Strategy and Strategy, and it gives me immense pleasure in welcoming you all here today to the micro-segmentation, the key to achieving zero trust security with effectively mitigating ransomware attacks webinar. I welcome you on behalf of Akamai, CloudExchange.io, and Strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, while ransomware has been around for years, its frequency has exploded in the last were perpetrated by individuals. Now, they are launched by a network group of affiliates who leverage other specialized. Attacks for once unfocused and unidimensional. Now, they use multi-layer tactics that are much harder to defend against and command much higher ransoms. It is expected to cost $42 billion in damages by the end of 2024. And we've also seen that an attack hits every 14 seconds worldwide, and every organization is at a risk, while escalating scope and volume. India has witnessed 218% rise in ransomware attacks in 2021, and a total of 100 were recorded by India in 2020, as per response filed by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Arguably, the most influential trend in which attackers steal data and threaten to publish it in addition to encrypting it. And we've seen that roughly around 50% of ransomware attacks now include attempts to exfiltrate data. There is one underlying strategy that maximizes an organization's chances at mitigating the damage a ransomware attack can cause. That is zero trust. The number of businesses that have adopted the zero trust security model has grown exponentially. This classic approach to security is no longer viable, meaning that businesses must shift to meet their user applications and data where they live, that is, on the cloud. Through today's webinar, ladies and gentlemen, we will witness Akamai's very own journey to zero trust and understand how you can implement a solid zero trust strategy within your organization. We also aim to help you discover how microsegmentation can combat ransomware once and for all, and find out how your zero trust strategy can help you protect your employees. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure of welcoming Mr. Dean Wari, Director of Security, Technology, and Strategy for APJ at Akamai. Thank you, Dean, for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Let me share my deck. Okay, well, I'm Dean Wari. I'm responsible for security strategy at Akamai for Asia Pacific and Japan. I do have a passion. I mean, from all security technologies that I cover, I'm obviously passionate about cloud native security, Kubernetes, and in this case, zero trust. And I'll try to take you through, the evolution of the security landscape, and why, I guess it's in the news, why a new security strategy is in place. The landscape is pretty clear. I mean, it used to be pre-pandemic, maybe a few years before that you basically hear about attacks here and there. You hear about ransomware, but not so much. But those attacks are pretty much on the news every month or every week. They have grown exponentially, targeting all type of customers across all the industry, whether it's a finance or e-commerce or even companies that were not traditionally targeted, like gasoline with the pipelines and the meat industry. Customers that, or even like education sector, universities are being shut down because of ransomware attacks. So this is serious. I mean, obviously, it is affecting all companies across the board. So there has been, obviously, the web traffic have increased quite a bit. I mean, the latest data that we have at Akamai, where we pretty much located at the edge of the internet. So we're located where the traffic is actually coming from the internet, and we are in consequence the closest to the attackers, because the attackers are going to be attacking from the internet. Um, we do see a huge increase in the amount of web traffic. We logged a record of 207 terabyte of traffic recorded, and with that, there's been a huge rise in terms of web type and API attack, as well as bots and credential abuse. We saw, like, in the numbers in the billions for the WAF alert. WAF obviously is our edge WAF with various type of attack vectors, with local file injection, and cross-site scripting and everything else. Attackers trying to find ways to inject malicious payloads, or hijack customers' web front or portals, and as well as they're trying to find ways of stealing credentials to initiate and take over customer environment endpoints or servers in order to trigger other type of attacks that we'll see, that I'll cover pretty soon. So it's hitting record numbers in the billions, and we have to ask ourselves that whether the actual security is actually adequate. You hear about companies, major companies, being attacked successfully, being breached, being ransomed or extorted, and you have to ask yourself, don't these companies have a proper security? They do. Fortunately, the attack surface has evolved, and with that, the security strategy also has evolved. I mean, from a ransomware perspective, the damages are in the billions. Now, and this is and the data basically changes all the time. Uh, the amount of device infected every second. I mean, so it's just incredible. That shows you the footprint and the leverage that the attackers have on customer environments. And it's we're talking about days and not months or years in terms of attack. Pretty much every month you hear of some attacks. That's the one you hear about. That means they're affecting major companies. And there's a loss of revenue because the ransom implies that you're paying money to somebody else in bitcoins. And we saw that in the news. And actually, as of today, there was a news that the U.S. government now is targeting or fining either the companies or posting rewards to get information on the ransomware gangs, because these are organized criminal gangs. It's not a lone wolf type of attack, or this is an isolated incident. This is becoming kind of kind of an attack as a service, so to speak. Like, you hear about ransomware as a service, you hear about phishing as a service. It's becoming a big business on the dark web. So what is the problem? We see that the problem is that traditionally companies have firewalls. They have what you call a perimeter, and it's pretty much becoming clear that perimeter is no longer capable of handling securing the new attack surface, and it's becoming kind of a false sense of security. Now, no one is saying that firewalls are bad. It's just no longer adequate, no longer enough, because the threats now are no longer solely coming from the outside. It could come from the inside, and it's shifting the concept of attacks that will trigger a breach and whatnot, where the attackers can already be from the inside. Meaning is, yeah, you can have multi-stage attack where we saw with SolarWind, for example, where it could be affecting the source codes that the developers are using to deploy the application, thus implying that the attackers are using the customer operation team to deploy the application, the weaponized application on their behalf, that they could trigger easily using some kind of API call, or on their web front. Meaning is, the attacker is already in. He does not, the attacker, he or she does not have to go through the process of trying to breach a firewall anymore. That's just too much work. So the idea of thinking that the outside of the company is unsafe and whatever inside is safe, that you don't have to worry about security within a company's infrastructure or in business infrastructure, that's pretty much an outdated way of thinking. It is being proven that it's just no longer working. When we look at the scope and the scale of the attacks available, there is no more inside outside or inside versus outside. There is no more kind of like, and now actually with the problem is getting worse with with since the COVID with remote working. So you have everybody remotely connecting to to the environment, keeping track of passwords, VPN connections, and so forth. All that is no longer scalable and actually just inviting trouble. And the attackers know it so well, using leveraging zero-day type vulnerabilities to to target customers. So this the concept of zero trust security is becoming front of center, is becoming top of mind of every CISO, CIOs, or security team across all verticals in the industry, because you cannot trust anybody anymore. You cannot trust your own users. You cannot trust, obviously, your consumers. You cannot trust any applications anymore. You don't want to have, a safe zone. Basically, everything is potentially a source or a platform that an attacker can use to launch the attacks. So there is no inside. You want to get rid of VPN, all right, because that is known to have security holes or 0 days that can be leveraged by attackers, and the scalability doesn't work. Obviously, password is obvious. How many times, leaked passwords from users, or as well, you have developers when they write their application, they have to use different type of API keys or other type of passwords to integrate their applications and deploy their application, especially with DevOps. And those are leaked sometimes on um, open source repositories like GitHub, because I think that's how development has moved and evolved towards now with DevOps. You treat your application as a SaaS, so you control the access to the application, and every office could be a potential site to be an attack. So the evolution of hybrid environment. I mean, we all know that every business has had for the past few years a move to adopt a hybrid type architecture or multi-type architecture. So it's no longer purely data center. And this is we see across all the verticals in the industry, whether finance, government, everything is moving to type of type environment. And that's adding complexity because now you have to secure different environments, maintain potentially different security policies, and the complexity of these things just introduce holes in the security policies and invite attackers to successfully breach an environment. Visibility is made worse by especially when you have a hybrid or multi-cloud environment. In the cloud you have to give it an IAM account to uh, which is the way the authorization and access is done to the cloud to all your users. So now you have not IT no longer controlling or establishing the guardrails to deploy workloads. Now you can have anybody that has an IAM account to deploy a virtual machine or a service or a database, and knowledge to deploy the service obviously is going to be a problem with the proper permissions, with the proper compliance to regulation, as well as keeping tabs of who is deploying what, because the cloud does not give you that visibility. So visibility is going to be key. This is going to be the foundation of having your foundation for your security. We spoke of complexity, having multiple environments like AWS security policy, you have your data center security policy, you have Google or other type of environment. So you have obviously huge amount of rules because if you're solely based on a parameter, you don't want to, you just keep adding rules to the stack of your policy because you don't want to touch whatever is there. And that you have longer and more kind of a spaghetti-like type policies. The integration with DevOps. Now, DevOps, obviously, with cloud native type workloads, with containers and serverless, and even the way applications to reduce costs and to be more elastic with the cloud native type. You need DevOps. You need to be able to scale on demand. That introduce a new attack surface where the code itself and the way of DevOps working and deploying automatically your workloads and the packages of having containers or serverless where now containers use only code, and the layers that are being within the container are introducing vulnerabilities because that's third-party dependencies. And so you have all this risk that needs to be managed now by customers. So you need to kind of find a way to find a solution that allows you to give you a methodology about security your environments, whether it's hybrid, whether it's multi-cloud, whether you have DevOps or not, whether you have a combination of firewalls and other type of solution. That basically needs to be addressed. It's no longer okay. I have this parameter and I'm good to go. That's basically having an internet, just have a WAF or just have a firewall facing the internet is no longer enough. Uh, this is kind of actually makes fun of it, but essentially you don't want to trust anyone. So with that thing is you have to have a new strategic approach about how you go about your security, looking at the threats. Ransomware is front and center, but what is ransomware? Ransomware is essentially a type of a lateral movement attack. Lateral in the sense is that the attack is not initiated from the internet, is initiated from the inside of your environment, from server to server or from server to endpoint and so forth. So it's laterally, the attack is being, attackers are using a server or an endpoint within your environment to then propagate some kind of malicious file or in this case ransomware to wreak havoc, to extort, to encrypt, to exfiltrate your data, essentially to do whatever attack that is planned by the attackers. So in this case, having this zero trust approach needs to be formulated as some kind of strategies. Zero trust is not so much products. Zero trust is going to be kind of a strategy or a methodology about with which you go about architecting your security moving forward. And it has different components. And microsegmentation, which is a topic of this particular session, is a foundational components of your zero trust framework. So at Akamai for the past year or so, we've kind of looked at how to implement a proper and holistic and complete zero trust strategy. You hear zero trust is kind of becoming this buzzword that everybody uses. So, because I'm zero trust, so I have this product. It's not going to be just one product. It's going to be a comprehensive layering and combination of different products working together, looking at how the attacks now have evolved. Okay, and we'll look at that. But we're proud to say that Akamai, we're pretty much the only one that has combined a full zero trust strategy by having a zero trust network access combined with microsegmentation. So the zero trust network access is to have a zero trust security for all connection coming from the internet, north south, and microsegmentation to handle all the lateral movement within your environment, whether it's data center, whether it's hybrid or multi-cloud. So each one of these pillars, obviously there's a product that is mapped to them, tackle the direction of that security. So I mentioned no VPN, obviously. So you need to handle how your employees are remotely accessing in a safe and a scalable manner your environment, and that's where we have the enterprise application access solution that is installed on all the endpoints. The endpoints being, your employees' machines across different type of operating system. So that's one. Obviously, you want to ensure that there is no malicious, because the goal is when the attacker basically is trying to launch this kind of attacks, and in this particular case, ransomware, it's not just one stage attack. It's going to be a multi-stage attack. Somehow you need to find a way of implanting the ransomware within a customer environment on a server, right? So the planting is essentially, so you have to find a way of downloading that malicious file onto a server. And that's so one of the areas is, leveraging somebody's account to remotely access that the server, that endpoint, and plant the malware. So application access is key, and protection the access to the application is going to be key. That's what EA will tackle. I don't have the time to deep dive into every product, so we can take that offline or in a further session. The other one is obviously having your firewall to protect all type of threat, DNS, SWIG, SASE type situation, and that's what the ETP does. MFA is becoming key, and it has to be phish-proof MFA, as I'll explain later. one of the big thing that the attackers will do, nobody wants to spend time anymore breaching a firewall. Okay, if that's what you have in your perimeter, you could use phishing to hijack or to get somebody's account, or to trigger to download a script to plant the malware into a server, bypassing all the security. So ensuring that there is whoever is getting authenticated is actually a legal user, that this is not some kind of account that was stolen by phishing or spear phishing, is going to be key. So having phish-proof MFA is essential. That's something we offer. And finally, what I'll dive in this session is microsegmentation that uh, we have acquired, and I'll explain that further. But before we sold this to customers, we basically implemented it completely within our Akamai IT environment. All our infrastructure is fully zero trust and has adopted all our solution from the remote access. There is no VPN. It's completely using the EEA solution, protecting the applications on and the desktops and the servers with ATP and microsegmentation to prevent lateral movement type attacks. So for the microsegmentation, the way we look at it, microsegmentation is essentially the first step about zero trust. You need to microsegment your environment, your network, because this is where the traffic lives. For that, a year ago, we've acquired Guardicore, which was already a leader in the microsegmentation sector. And we've so far joined, obviously acquired it, and now having that to as a leading product to tackle the ransomware problem. So let's look at what microsegmentation is. Is microsegmentation a new concept? Not really. I mean, we know that network segmentation has been around forever, since the days of the VLANs, of VRFs, of subnets. You think of a concept of having a shift, and why you have segmentation is because you want to isolate certain endpoints or certain servers, so that they may not communicate with other servers. Um, and you can think of the shipping industry, whether it's a submarine or a ship. I mean, a ship essentially has a hull, right? I mean, you basically know to prevent the water from getting in, and the image of this is the water being the attackers. So that's basically the pre-zero trust. You have a hull, that's your perimeter, that's your firewall. You think that's good enough, but shipbuilders know better, and this is going back since the beginning of time. They know that eventually the water is getting in. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. Um, so, and that's the concept of introducing bulkheads, whether it's in the in the 15th century ships or the new ships, because you want to create apartments to prevent that if there was a breach in the water, then you can basically localize and contain the breach without sinking the whole ship. And I think that's basically the easiest way of explaining the whole concept of microsegmentation, how you can segment your application, not just your network and your application, effectively, that if there was to be a breach, then you can contain the breach and mitigate the impact of that attack, that it doesn't bring your organization to a standstill. All right. So essentially, that's the concept. But it's easier said than done. So you will see that there's different solutions that are offered on the market, but it's easy to see which one is actually the most effective. Now we know that the traditional network segmentation with VLANs and firewalls with DMZs is no longer effective, because just look at the news. I mean, there's ransomware attacks, successful ransomware attacks are happening all the time. So we know that that's no longer enough. I mean, and it's beyond just subnets and IPs. It has to be environments. It has to be applications. It has to be application tiers. It has to be department. So there's now it's beyond just the basic layer 3, layer 4. It has to go all the way to layer 7, and maybe even layer 10. Meaning is with organization and people. Um, so so this is what Akamai Guardicore segmentation. This is what an effective segmentation needs to tackle. So one thing to look at it, the way it has been implemented, it is the same way you saw with the network evolution. Traditionally, you had the network with just one topology, and then you had software-defined networking to create a kind of an overlay to be able to easily, automatically generate network for certain teams as you on the go. So you see that with AWS with VPNs, or VNets with Azure, and so forth. The same thing with microsegmentation. So microsegmentation, look at it as a software-defined segmentation. So this is the best way. It is software. It's not dependent on switches. It's not dependent on routers or physical firewalls. It's completely done in an overlay process to reduce the attack surface. I mean, that's the goal. And we have a tool actually at Guardicore. If you go to this link, they'll give you your attacks, the visualization of your actual attack surface, to see that, as you can see here, there is thousands and hundreds of thousands of connection. Meaning is, if an attacker was to get in, and God forbid, then that attacker will have access to all these servers, all these endpoints. He can take the attacker can take his or her time to do reconnaissance and basically decide which critical asset the attacker will then target. But if you have segmentation, then you reduce the attack surface. Meaning is, you go from exposing thousands of IPs and ports and thousands of application to maybe tens. So you can reduce the attack surface by 99% without any downtime or any impact to because it's done at the using an overlay. So the underlay is not impacted, and you don't have to kind of go and talk to different infrastructure team to implement the policy, just like you do with the cloud or software-defined networking. Now, this is old news. I mean, this is even a couple of years ago. Then, even the government basically started by adding regulation. At first, it was kind of like a warning. Look, listen, we highly recommend to adopt zero trust segmentation, segment your environments. It started with Log4j and SolarWind attacks when attackers are using 0 days to kind of plant malware to then use that as a staging. They use one of the server that has been accessed, uh, bypassing all the perimeter security to launch an attack. All right, so that's pretty much. But now it's going beyond. If you look at the news just today, the U.S. government is basically thinking of fining the Colon pipeline by like $1 million, and we see that across different regions around the world, different either by the legal system that holding the customers now accountable, and this will obviously trigger, hopefully in a good way, that people got to start taking security seriously. Say, hey, we do need to implement a zero trust approach, and start by obviously the network, because this is the foundation of the whole operation, and then take it from there. So the old way firewalls, you have different segments that are based on IPs, are based on ports, where any change of the segmentation requires downtime, obviously, because you have to change the connectivity, you have to change the subnets. The attack surface is larger because a firewall zone is not just one server. It's going to be a few servers, or maybe tens or hundreds of servers. So that's basically slow. I mean, so it's not like it's. I mean, we're not saying it's not if it's not. You immediately have to throw away your firewalls, but we're saying is agility is going to be key, because now attacks are happening in seconds or minutes. They no longer take like a month or a year to attack. Things are happening so quickly. Then when you have to change your security, it will take time, and by that time the attacker is come and gone. So you need a more kind of dynamic cloud native type of approach, where you use, instead of using IP and ports and zone based on network underlay, you use basically more cloud native approach, using metadata, using tags or labels. We call them labels, which are basically an identifier of an asset, which is a server or a laptop, an endpoint, a machine, that is independent from the location, which is the IP or its name. Meaning is, using those things allow you to group assets together regardless of their location, because you don't care about the IP anymore. So you can have servers, for example, in your data centers, and servers in the cloud. It doesn't matter. They can be grouped together. And grouping is to assign a policy, a security policy, meaning block and allow, in order to control how and who's accessing the servers, and limit the scope of an attack if there is one. So, and that can be done in a matter of minutes, and it could be done easily. It could be done by any team. You don't have to be an expert of networking to be able to imply, or a security expert to do this. I mean, as you can see with the cloud, you assign a tag to a server, and then you could just basically assign policy on the fly. And I'll show you this in a demo. So that's the new way. This is the evolution. So it's not going to be, it's going to be a journey that every customer needs to take seriously, but it allows you to, obviously, speed is of the essence. It gives you visibility of assets across all the environment, if it's multi-cloud or hybrid. The risk obviously goes down tremendously because, if you, let's say, God forbid, an attacker gets in and you didn't realize it because of whatever reason, but you find out, you can actually stop an attack while it's actually happening, because then you can create a group your server in a way, using labels quickly, and then quarantining the whole thing and stopping the breach in its tracks. And obviously lower cost, because using a software defined approach using labels is a lot cheaper than managing IPs. That takes teams, that takes downtime, that takes weeks of planning and testing, and that basically involve OpEx and as well. Okay. All right. Let me see. Okay. So, and you don't have to worry about hardware refresh cycles and overhead. Now, I mean, once again, I'm not we're not accusing anyone, but obviously segmentation in front and center across all type of companies. It's not like a certain vertical or a certain industry. Now everybody is game. As long as if you have an internet presence, that now pretty much everybody has since the start of the pandemic. Even manufacturing that was completely offline or off the grid now is becoming online because of everybody either the workforce that needs to remotely access or the ability that now with e-commerce and everything else picking up speed, so that as long as you have a web footprint, an internet footprint, you're going to be gamed for attack. And even though if you're not, the attackers knows that DevOps is now the way of deploying application, and they can just go and poison the code online, on the open source repository or open source third-party dependency that the application needs to use to develop their application, and use that to trigger infection from the inside. Now, let's go how a ransomware actually installs. Okay, once again, ransomware is by definition a lateral attack. It's not north-south. It's solely from server to server, server to endpoint, or endpoint to server. Okay, let's just be clear. So ransomware is a lateral attack, and the first step is clear. You have the attackers need to find a way, and ransomware being a malicious file, I mean a type of malware, need to install a malware that's on a server or an endpoint. Okay, so the perimeter needs to be breached. Now, how are they going to breach a perimeter? They're not going to brute force a firewall. That's just too much work and too much. It's going to raise all kind of alarms. So silence and stealth is a key requirement for a successful ransomware attack. This is why the companies don't know about it until they get hit. So they're going to breach the perimeter by typically phishing, meaning is sending emails or sending links that that looks valid, to using even corporate email for the user to click and then trigger the download of a malware, bypassing all the security. So phishing is going to be one of the key things, so to expose, and also you have obviously we saw with Log4j with 0 days within the application source code to allow, for example, Log4j, we saw that using an LDAP call to download a malware, because then you do a privilege escalation that allow the attackers to do whatever they want on the server. Brute force is the last on the list. I mean, it is still happening, but brute force typically will raise alarms, triggering attention from the security teams. But as you can see here, it's low effort. I mean, we know now that phishing is a huge problem, whether it's a bot or it's done manually. That users within a company sometimes lack the awareness and the knowledge not to click on the link that they're not familiar with. It does happen all the time, and this is also part of the other approach. I mean, with remote access, so just as a VPN is, you need to ensure that if they're using the laptop on a private email, they click on the link, that malware does not actually be installed on the device, on the user laptop or on a server that can be used as a staging platform for an attack. So the goal is for the attacker to get a footprint within a customer environment. So that's basically the goal. That's step one. Step two, once you're in, then you want to obviously have a privilege escalation. You want to get privileges to do what? You want to do reconnaissance. You need to know to do a map of the landscape to know what are the critical servers, what are the machines, the laptop of critical of users with big privileges, or target maybe servers that were spinned or created maybe in the cloud or the data center with too many permissions. And this is really common because of the lack of knowledge or IT not doing it. And now with the cloud, anybody can spin a VM or a container or a cluster or whatever. So that takes time. This is actually the longest part of the attack. When that is done, is part of the reconnaissance is what application you want, databases, critical databases. So because what the way to extract the ransom from a customer is encrypt all the files and data that is vital for the customer's operation to take place. And not just the files, the backup as well, because if they have the backups, then they can have a way to recover. And once that is done, then basically they can send you a message, to pay a ransom with bitcoins. So encrypt everything and locking a customer out of its business. And we saw that in the news. And actually to the point that sometimes if you don't have money, this actually brought down companies, bankrupted them, or put them out of business. Now, this is just like the mafia, right? So in case you don't pay up, but you have money, then this could be combined with other type of attack like DDoS. The DDoS meaning is if you don't pay, then we're gonna DDoS you, kind of we'll call that ransomware DDoS or extortion DDoS to force a customer to pay. So if you don't have microsegmentation, this is what typically happens. You have using phishing or using 0-day or using like Log4j or freeze frog or whatever to kind of get malware installed on a server or an endpoint. When that is done, the attack will be gather intelligence, looking for critical servers, looking for critical data, CEO laptops, CEO machines that are exposed because you don't have proper segmentation. So there's absolutely nothing blocking the attacker to move around laterally in the environment. And when it is done, then drop the ransomware and encrypt the critical file. But if you do have microsegmentation, you reduce essentially the attack surface. Then obviously this will, let's say, even though you're a bridge and even though there is lateral movement. So now we're not saying microsegmentation eliminates lateral movement. It reduces the impact of the breach. Obviously, you want to eliminate it if possible, but if the odds now today that's like almost like impossible. I mean, that's the new reality. You need to accept the fact that breaches are going to happen or have happened and you didn't even know about it. So you want to make sure that in case there's lateral movement and in case, let's say, even if they were asked to access the finance server, you could quickly create a new group, a new segment that could basically quarantine off whatever server and prevent the spread to other financial servers. So, but that has to be done. Speed is of the essence. And this is where microsegmentation can either prevent any the attack itself from happening because you block all lateral movement because you fenced off all your servers, you fenced off all your critical elements, and you've prevented this to happen. Meaning is to see that this is the banner that typically happens that customers will see. All right. So use cases. Obviously, how do I start? Well, there are. So we will work with you as Akamai Guard, as Akamai to help you lead. It's a journey. We worked with major customers. We have major customers that have implemented this microsegmentation successfully. But these are the most obviously to start because you want environment segmentation, and you want that because now when you look at the banking industry, this is no longer a choice; it is a requirement to be compliant with the financial regulation. You need to make sure that dev environments cannot access production environments. I mean, that's like basic. So we can help you to do that quickly. I mean, if you have software, you can create these software groups based on tags that could be done within days and not weeks, and having to bring down your whole environment. And we've successfully done that. Application ring fencing, meaning is, okay, I don't know exactly what are the IP addresses or the subnets or the application I need to secure because it takes time sometimes for security team get a grasp of what exactly being deployed or which application. But at least you can say, okay, these are the critical, these are my most critical crown jewel applications. Like this is my database. If that was to be encrypted, I'll die. Or these are some servers that I can absolutely not afford to be breached. Then you could just create a fence around them, meaning you group them together and you put a policy around it to ensure that nobody can basically breach them. So that's another use case that is easy to start with. And then you say, okay, but the key with ring fencing is you put a fence, so to speak, meaning you group them together, and an application at different tiers. You have the database tier, you have the application tier. So all these tiers, when you fence, all these tiers are freely able to communicate with each other. But you want a more zero trust approach, meaning is you want even to microsegment within the application tiers. So yeah, you can do the combination of fencing with application microsegmentation to say, hey, I don't want even the tiers to even trust each other. So that's basically that you can take it further, and you can also control the access, because obviously when you have an environment, you need to manage it. So you're going to have it in the cloud, you're going to have jump boxes, and you have other type of access servers. So you will control not just access from the network level, but you want to control also from user groups. Like if you have ADs, like the AD directories, that you want to share, only this group of user can actually manage, like only the server admins can manage these servers. Because credential theft is and phishing is going to be the most common way of breaching the perimeter, so you want to control that. And let's say, God forbid, your ransomware attack happened. How can I stop it in its tracks? How can I recover from ransomware? Obviously, if you've been successfully breached and you had a ransomware, the key to get around that, they'll give you a decryptor file so you can decrypt your servers. But then once an attacker has been in the environment, are you going to trust an attacker to say, hey, okay, I'm going to give you the crypto file and everything is going to be fine? Typically, they're going to leave a footprint to come back later for more money. So you want to ensure that you kind of disinfect completely your environment, and that's going to be to have a a real microsegmentation solution. You need to have also a solution that allows you to clean up in case there was an attack. And we've seen that sometimes we've done POCs with customers, and we have some major customers actually that we were able to not only to see an attack happening, but also we were able to stop it, and that basically allow us to get to successfully uh, win those deals. So you'll be surprised. Like I said, reconnaissance is if you don't have visibility on whole environment, you'll be surprised that attacks are happening, and customers are not even aware of it. So yeah, also, we talk about attacks, right? So people say, well, I have EDR or I have XDR or I have NDR. What's the difference between that and microsegmentation? Meaning is you put an agent that say, okay, well, I'm going to make sure I don't get any malware downloaded on an endpoint. But those solutions, what they do is you install EDR only on endpoints, meaning is your Mac or your Windows. I mean, most of the time it's only Windows, but Mac, whatever, or Linux. But attackers are not targeting endpoints; they're targeting servers, because this service is where your application lives. Service is where you have the most privilege, because application needs to be able to run. EDR, XDR, and all that stuff are not installed on servers. They are installed on endpoints. And so attackers do not target typically endpoints. So securing only using EDR is not going to work. Um, and so this is why software microsegmentation is a requirement. Now you can add EDR to it. That's great. But it's not EDR versus microsegmentation. Microsegmentation allows you to really reduce the attack surface effectively from layer 3 all the way to layer 7, right? And we've analyzed, so at Akamai Guard, of course, it's beyond a microsegmentation company. We have also threat intelligence. So we do place a lot of honeypots around the world where we invite attacks from all these ransomware famous gangs. All you heard of Conti, which is the most famous one, actually. You have Maze, Revel, and you have many of them, but obviously, so these are organized gangs that not only do attacks, but also sell ransomware as a service on the dark web. So in case people don't have a knowledge on how to build a ransomware and how to conduct it, they can actually use that as a service. But anyway, we looked at what we've done, and maybe not a surprise to all of you, is most of the servers that are targeted are Windows. It's not like the movies when you see all these screens and you have all this Unix-like or Linux type of command line. It looks funny and it looks really cool, like the Matrix. it's Windows. Windows is the most targeted, and the most protocol and credential for propagations you typically use with PSExec and RDP, which is RDP. Traditionally, all the companies is open because it's necessary for remotely accessing your Windows machines. SSH as well. But that's pretty much what these gangs are basically targeting. And a lot of these exploit kits, because ransomware by itself is not really useful. Ransomware is the malware that encrypts a file, but you need to deploy it. So it needs to be combined with a network deployment kit that will automate, uh, sending this, downloading the malware, this ransomware into machines over the network, and then triggering the ransomware to execute. So it has to be weaponized, so to speak. So ransomware itself. So that's why these GANs not only either create a ransomware, use a ransomware, but they build these automation scripts around deploying. So we do with these honeypots that we have around the world. We do invite them to attack so we can see what kind of ransomware they're using. We can see what kind of a exploit kits they're deploying, and so we can go back and test them and also update our security within our environment. So we provide a holistic microsegmentation solution to customers. Uh, so it's important to have a plan. It's not like, okay, I'm gonna microsegment everything, because if you over microsegment, then it becomes too much work and too much overhead on your environment. You don't want that. You want to have the kind of strike the balance between security, but also a low operating overhead. You can't just like a microsegment everything. That's just crazy. So you want to pick a few business critical application that you want to basically ring fence. You want to reduce obviously the privilege, because privilege escalation is what these attackers are after. So you want to make sure that the right teams are actually the one that have administrative access to certain servers. You want to make sure of that. You want to obviously restrict a user that has no business accessing a certain application should be restricted from it. That's number one. And so it could be based on obviously on credential and identity. It could be AD, it could be whatever other type of identity key that you have. It could be based on remote access or third party if you have contractors or business partners. So it's essentially that's the plan that needs to be formulated, and rest assured that that's something that basically Akamai can work with your customers to do that. To conduct obviously risk assessment, we look at your environment and say, okay, we can segment, say obviously segment environments, segment teams, segment application, and how to protect, how to go about effectively with the lowest OpEx and business overhead, and to have the maximum visibility to how to segment, to have the proper segmentation strategy. So it's not like the old day segmentation. Okay, I'm just going to build a few VLANs and VRFs. I'm good to go. No, there has to be a plan around your obviously the network, but also from the identity, the users, and also the application. So it's going to time. Now we are proven. I mean, there was the first microsegmentation quadrant that was released by Forrester back in February or March, and were named the leader, obviously from a microsegmentation perspective, and that'd be great to work with that. So this said, I am gonna demo it to show you a live ransomware attack and show you how our solution works. Okay, with that, I'm gonna minimize this. Now we have I've chosen to have 3 servers. So I'm not going to demo the actual takeover of a server, the planting of the ransomware. We assume that this was a customer server, whatever type, um, uh, and the ransomware is being installed, and this will be the staging point of an attacker towards other servers. In this case, I have a server that doesn't have any microsegmentation security policy, and I have a server that has actually an agent installed, and that will be implementing the security policy managed centrally by our microsegmentation management server. Now, yes, it is Asian based, and I know there could be a question about, okay, another Asian, but Asian is how the best way to do it, because to have a successful software microsegmentation, you need to have beyond layer 3, and the only way to get visibility on all the software processes from an application perspective that are running on your server, you need an agent that has there. And also, if you want to have a minimum overhead, you need to be able to just apply the policy that only is specific to this particular server. Otherwise, you have to download the whole policy to every server, which you'll see with other vendors. That will add basically CPU and memory overhead, where our agent only consume less than maybe 1% of that's 1% of less than 2 megabits of resource. So obviously we are aware of the resource consumption of the server, and they have to be really lightweight. So to trigger an attack, as I mentioned, attackers will have a toolkit, will have the ransomware file, and they will initiate a script that will target servers. So it's a target IP is a text file that has a few the IP addresses of the servers that where the file needs to be encrypted, and a username and credentials that that were acquired during the reconnaissance in the environment. I put this ominous wallpaper that to show that this is a takeover server. But anyway, it's you think of attacks, ransomware, very complex, but you look at it's very basic. It's a text file. They have a few IP addresses, and this is actually a real one that we got out of our honeypots around the world, um, and just username and password. And the script is actually some kind of this is just basically a basic script to target these machines and download and execute it. So as you can see, this is actually this is not like super so sophisticated. Anybody could run this. So before I run the attack, let me show you visibility. So this is the UI of our management server, which we call Central. So visibility, as I mentioned, is going to be key, and by that you can basically you need to have visibility of every environment. The moment whether you have an agent or not, we will discover all possible endpoints and servers that are deployed in your environment and is talking to your environment, right? And it's not just by the network, it will also go all the way to the process level. As you can see, all the processes are running on the environment, whether it's Windows or Linux. And you can easily, it's fast, as you can see here, and you can see all the connections with the port numbers being used. Now, for the sake of the things, you can create your own map. So for the demonstration, we chose 3 machines. One machine that doesn't have an agent, call it dev. And you can see here, this is the segmentation. And the segmentation is done using labels. So if you click on the particular device, here you will see here the label groups and the labels being used for this particular. So it's just as easy of, so if you add, for example, app accounting label, beta, then it will be in this particular circle, which is the grouping that is being done. Now you see only one machine, but it could be more. And you could basically choose by the type of tags. So the label or tag hierarchy is, it could be by your company own organization. It could be by application type, by role, it could be by environment, and you're free to choose and name the labels as you see fit. It's a key value, so it's pretty standard, and whatever you want to call it. So as you can see here, it's a development environment. This is some of the bypass to allow the RDP. This is coming from vCenter, so we do import the labels from vCenter if that's required. As you can see, so there's absolutely no care about what's its IP and its name, as long as you add this. So if you have 2 servers with this particular tag, they'll be grouped together. So this is how simple. And if you remove the tag, then it gets removed from this particular grouping. So this is on-the-fly type security that you can have in visibility. So, and you know where I'm getting at. So let's say if this machine was actually successfully breached, if you just add a tag saying quarantine ransomware, and you put all block, all deny, then this machine will effectively be quarantined in a matter of seconds. It'd be just adding a label. So you can see basically how effectively how it is. So you can see the connection that you have now. You can see the port numbers, and like as I say, all the way to the process level. But essentially, the demo will be an attack machine, and we'll see how one will have an agent, will have not. The goal is, once you have an agent, obviously, is to create your rules. Now you're gonna say, how do I create rules? I'm not a security expert. Well, that's pretty much easy. What we allow you to do is, for example, when you go to, I'm gonna go to the daily map, and I'm gonna go by app and role. So let's say in this case, I'm going to talk about, let's go take accounting because that's critical to me. So accounting, you have, these are you can see quickly the application tiers. So you're going to have obviously accounting servers facing the web, and then you have your load balancer, so this is facing the internet, and you have your database servers. So the three tiers, web, app, and database, right? So you can see how quickly this thing is. So the segmentation, you get the most basic segmentation, you can do things. You can fence it, meaning is you put your security policy around the three, but you can go further. You can do tier segmentation and say, okay, well, I want to control how these even tiers are talking to each other, and then block everything else. So you whitelist all the connections between the tiers, and you blacklist, you deny everything else. So so this is how quickly you can build your rules, and this is what we've done for accounting. And you can choose the rule sets. In this case, production. And for the sake of time, I'm sorry, I don't have time to a deep dive, but so you can see I have 3 allow and 1 deny, and 1 block. And it could be alert. So there's different modes. It could be alert, and it's not always block, because initially you may not know which application is targeted the most. So you can have it alert and look at the counter. But what you can see here, we give you a counter and the amount of sessions. But essentially what I say, okay, so I want, this is from the internet, from the management side. So the jump box to my LB, load balancer, right? In this case, it's Nginx. So you can control all the way to the process level. So you have the label level, and then you have also the process level. And the process, obviously, you can choose from all the processes, and even further to the path where the process is actually installed. Um, in here, obviously you can choose the process, but also you can choose user groups and saying, I mean, I only want the server managers. This is how quickly you can configure the policy and also configure the port. It doesn't have to be all TCP UDP. You can set the port, and you can set the policy based on, and you can name the rule set to manage it. And obviously the mode is allow. So we're allowing Jumpbox to this particular load balancer, and then and then we go from load balancer to web server. So this is from the web tier to the application tier, and the application tier to database, in case MongoDB. And let me get rid of this. And it's 27017, and you don't have to remember it. You can just go to Explore, and it'll show you the port number based on the connection link. Okay, here, production, and then you have accounting, and you can quickly see that accounting is here. As you can see, you can drill it down. You can see 27017. And if you want to know which process within which database server, you can even go further. Okay, and you can collapse it quickly, right? And you can create policy from here as well, and it'll give you all the information. Now, so the rule is here, all right? Okay, so the goal is now that if the attacker machine to send ransomware, we should not see the agent, the server that has the agent that is being that will be the file that will be encrypted, but we'll see encryption on the other file. So as you can see, the files here, you have different documents, critical documents. They're JPG, XLS, and all visible. And there's just pictures. It could be whatever, my dog actually. Uh, and so let's initiate the script. So that's what I'm saying. This is the lateral movement. It will try to laterally over the network connect to the first server, which is this one. Okay. And is attempting to download the ransomware to this device and to execute the script to actually install the ransomware and in turn encrypt the file on the server. Might take a few minutes, might take a few seconds, but essentially that's that's the first step, and it'll go through the IP list in the text file. The reason it's not happening, as you can see here, is because now the connection is being blocked. And you can look at all the connection and who's trying to connect you with the timestamp, and with the source IP trying to access this. So this, the status. And that was not successful. So now it goes to the other server. We'll try again. Okay, and as you can see here, then it went to the other one. And here you can see that the machine that doesn't have an agent with a security policy has been breached. All the file has been encrypted. It used to be a picture of my dog. Now it tells you cannot open the file because it's encrypted ENC. You will get a nice wallpaper saying this is actually a real one. I didn't create this. This is from one real attack that was done on our honeypots. All the files have been encrypted. They'll give you to pay these bitcoins at this particular wallet, and you will get a ransom letter. They'll tell you basically the same thing, where to send the money and to use their account, right? As you can see here, so if we go back to investigate the attack further, if we go to the map, and we'll refresh it, we can see that the session was established, and we can see that the attack took place, and the attack happened on these ports, which is NetBIOS and the typical ports that are used by Windows that were successfully, the attack happened. Okay, right, and obviously the other one as well. But this one, the attack did not actually happen. And if we go and I'll add connection type, and I say blocked, and you can choose violated to further filter. As you can see here, you can see that we add a nice red color to the attacks, and you can see the connection was blocked. And these are the ports that was that was made, but the connection was effectively blocked. So these are the typical Windows port that I mentioned, and these are the rule set that blocked it. So you can basically look at the policy that actually happened and the rule number, so you can go back and review it based on the attack that took place. Okay, all right. And we provide also network logs as well that will give you more information to dive into what happened. Okay. And I think for the sake of time, I'm going to stop it here. I think are we good on time?
Yep.
Okay. And so yeah, this was a quick demo, but as you can see here, another way of looking at it. That allows you to use this. So once again, just for the clarity, so if I was to, the agent is the one that blocks the attack on the rules that the specific rules that you have. Obviously, as you can see here, I have perhaps thousands of rules, but the only rules that are downloaded to the server, or it could be an endpoint as well, is the only rules that apply to that particular machine. We don't download every possible rules, right? As you can see here, policy rules. And you can also have a look at the rule that is solely downloaded into this into the agent, right? And okay, if you have any question now, just start a Q&A.
Yeah, Dean, you can check your questions panel. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So okay, so there's a few questions already. So what changes to the network are required to implement Akamai? There's absolutely no change to the network. And the reason being is it's all done, it's a software-defined approach, meaning is we use labels, as I mentioned. We don't care about the IP address. I mean, from a segmentation perspective, we don't segment based on IPs, we don't segment based on names. You could if you wanted to, but the labels are the one that allows you to completely do it seamlessly without any changes or impact on the actual network. So how intensive is the resource consumption? It's a minimal. Let me see if I can show you. Looking at the task manager. But it's minimal. So as you can see here, Guardicore is here. It's 0.06%, 2.2. It's very minimal, and this is while the policy is actually being applied and activated. So it's the amount of CPU, and memory we use is 68 meg. It's minimal in terms, and this is on a server. Okay, to apply and manage the policy. Well, yeah, okay, so this is a good question. Our cloud provider already offers us segmentation tools. How is Akamai better? Well, segmentation is not just create a VPC or a VNet or add some kind of virtual firewall. As I can see here, you have to be able to to have visibility on your whole environment. You're able to segment based on environments like dev, production, based on servers. So you can ring fence a server based on application processes, based on identity, and that's not no cloud provider will offer you that kind of segmentation. So if you have a VPC, if you're doing that VPC, if you're using access list, that's going to protect you perhaps at the using IP addresses, but that's not going to, you know, protect you at, if you're basically using a 0-day or like for example Log4j or SolarWind at the process level, it's going to be completely invisible to that. That will not protect an attacker to laterally move and attack your application. It's not application layer. Can you please help understand how the solution provide Log4j attack? So this solution will prevent Log4j attack. I'll give you an example. Is if you have, it gives you visibility on the processes that are running on your server. So we know that Log4j leverage Java processes. So we'll search. We have something we call the OS query that allows you to query, for example, the OS information or the processes. For example, you can see Java and you can check the Java version. That is whether it's susceptible to the attacks. You can see it gives you all the servers and all the version, or it could give you the process's name. So you can look for the Java readiness of your application, whether they're impacted by Log4j as well. And you can create a policy that no connection can be allowed if the Java version is less than 4.2. So this will effectively block anyone from running doing that Log4j attack to download the malware or the ransomware into the machine. Okay, so that is so obviously that could be done also from your WAF and everything else, but not all attacks are coming from the outside. The attack can also be triggered, can bypass all your parameter security, as we saw with Log4j, or can be done from the inside. And unless you have this type of microsegmentation, you won't be able to block it. And this could be done quickly. Meaning is if you are to protect all your servers and your application in a matter of a day. So the thing is with this type of 0-day like Log4j or Fritz frogs is the time of applying your policy. So by the time 0-day means that nobody knows about this vulnerability. This vulnerability has to be known, needs to be studied, and then that patch has to be released. We're talking 2 to 3 to 4 weeks maximum, a minimum between discovery and rule set parameter creation. So, but whereas here, if we know that, let's say, a certain version of an operating system or a certain version of a process running within, like for example, Java or whatever, is impacted, we can search the process name, and then we can basically block all connection to that particular process from server to server or from internet to process. This is what you can do effectively application level. So this is why this solution is more effective and faster. The moment you know about the 0-day, you can basically create immediately a security policy, which is impossible for any other security on the market. So the licensing is by agent. So we give you a minimum of a certain amount of agent that needs to be bought. It's reasonable. and we apply by agent. So the way you could ask, okay, I don't care about agent. We can also support an agentless approach, and we can work also with other hardware vendors to apply. But essentially, the recommendation is use the agent-based approach. So the licensing is by agent, the number of agents that are being deployed. And all the deployment can be done automatically using Ansible or other type of software configuration management tools. So is it based on number of endpoints? Is it based on a number of endpoints? I guess the licensing, maybe this, yeah. So it's going to be based on number of servers and endpoints that where you've installed the agent. Okay. We don't charge you a fee for every. We'll give you visibility, as I showed here before, on every possible device that is on your environment, across the cloud, across whatever. We'll give you visibility. We charge only for the servers and the endpoints where the agent has been installed. Once again, EDR is only endpoints, meaning laptops, but with us, we support where the ransomware attack actually happened, which are servers. And we support all old OSs as well. So you'll see some vendors will only sell agent support only for some Linux and Windows versions. We support all the way to AIX and Solaris, and because we know that a lot of the financial institution government are still running mainframes. We're the only market segmented solution that supports even mainframes, and we've deployed it at a lot of the banks in India. Pretty much every major, actually the top banks in India has adopted Akamai Guardian Core segmentation very effectively. So yeah, it is based on the the amount of agents that have been installed. But we also support Mac, laptops, Linux, and Windows. How much does it take to take for configuration? As you saw, it took me 2 minutes. It took me 2 minutes to create a rule. I mean, you know, it doesn't take. It's really quick. This is why this is so effective. And let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say, okay, I didn't know that an attack was happening. I did not have a rule, but I for whatever reason, I see that because you will know that this machine is somehow trying to connect to this server trying to connect to the server over certain ports, because you know which port to access. You can see that in the map. You can set alerts on the map, and you'll say, okay, this is off. This is not supposed to be happening. But I can basically create a rule saying, for example, create a rule that says deny all for this label. For example, let me add new rule, and I'll say override. Override meaning is whatever I have rules, I can override all my security. And source, basically I could say you could have by DNS, source any, or label group, or you could whatever, or whatever, any, which is here, any. And I could say basically to whatever servers that I have, that does, for example here, or it could be the whole network. Where did I put myself? Okay, hold on a second. I got a small screen here. Sorry. And you could block, and you could basically add, basically from there, you could, so once you apply, okay, cancel. And once you have that, then basically you could go to your assets, reveal assets. I'm going to discard that rule, assets, and I could basically take this asset and add a label. And I'll say, for example, quarantine. I'll be, for example, quarantine log4j, and add, and immediately this device will be offline. So that's how fast you can secure. And this is what I mentioned. This is the only solution that allows you to stop a breach while it's happening. And you know, control it. So this is from the mindset that that's actually the right mindset. Breaches are going to happen. It is impossible to block all breaches because you have 0 days, and 0 days nobody knows about them. All right. So, but you can actually block a breach from actually expanding and taking control of your environment. So we can stop a ransomware attack while it's happening. Implementation solution is just as easy as deploying the agents. That's what it is. And the agents can be deployed using automation like Ansible or Chef or Puppet. It happens within, you could, obviously we want to take you through a process to make sure that you have the right segmentation. But let's say if you have some compliance issues or you're really in a hurry and you want to protect your crown jewel servers, we could do that in a week. That basically, yeah. And there's no limit on the scale. We have customers that have hundreds of thousands of agents running in a major banks or major environments. So there's no scalability issue. As you can see here, the map is pretty extensive that I showed you with our uh, with our uh, with our reveal. We can go from maybe 10 agents to hundreds of thousands of agents, and they can be deployed, using automation and like Ansible or Chef or Puppet. So in India, I'm not going to name any customers because I can't do that and if you want to know more, please contact us offline and we'll be happy to share that with you. But you could picture the major banks that necessarily not have legacy environments have implemented successfully microsegmentation with Akamai Guardicore. So as you can see, a lot of the customers that are targeted for ransomware are typically banks, but also e-commerce and other type that are, we saw like meat companies and gasoline, critical infrastructure. So those are the one, or major service providers. But in India, we successfully positioned the solution and deployed the solution in production already. So one of the questions, for example, you're saying, okay, labels, I'm not familiar with labels, I have a legacy environment. But labels are not using with VMware vCenter. If you have that, you have AWS, you could have. So we do allow you, let's say, well, I don't know, I don't have any labels, or I don't want to create new ones. We do allow you to import whatever labels you already have. So as you can see here, we call that as part of the orchestration. You could add orchestration across AWS, Azure, GCP, Kubernetes, obviously with container. You can have Oracle, F5, OpenStack, across a wide array of, so you already set labels, you're already using tags for your environment like dev team, production team, or identify certain application or certain application tiers. You can import those and use them. We don't force you to adopt a new label model. We don't force you or restrict you to use a certain label of names or labeled numbers or hierarchies. You can use whatever you want. That's basically obviously a unique advantage of using Akamai Guardicore. All right, that's pretty much all the questions that are in the pad, and I really appreciate it and thank you for the question. I really hope that we can take this conversation forward. I know this is kind of a high level, let's say 5,000 feet view with a demo of what we can do, but obviously I think we can basically look at your specific industry, specific vertical, specific use cases, specific needs. But essentially, you want to change the mindset that if you want to truly start with your to have a 0-day approach, meaning is that the breach are not just come from the outside, they're going to come from the inside as well, whether it's from the remote user, from credential, from phishing, whatever. We can work with you to contain the breach, to mitigate the breach, to recover the breach. We can basically work with you to monitor your environment to show you how you can effectively transition your security and policy and strategy with a minimal or no impact to the various teams involved, as we saw with the labeling approach. Okay. Okay. Well, these are the questions, so I'll hand it over back to you.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you very much for that amazing and insightful presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you've enjoyed all parts of the presentation and the demo in there. And with that, it's time now to call it a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. We would request you to please take in a few moments of your time and fill in the feedback form. Please do mention any suggestions or recommendations that you have for us, and you will be prompted to fill in the feedback form in a short while from now. With that, it's a wrap. I hope that you've enjoyed today's webinar on microsegmentation, the key to achieving zero trust security and effectively mitigating ransomware attacks. I thank you all once again on behalf of Akamai, CloudExchange.io, and Strategy. We hope to see you soon at our upcoming webinars. Thank you once again, and do enjoy the rest of your day.